My problem wasn't the cancer, it was the aloneness. And if I long for anything in my life, it's connection. I'm trained as a psychologist, and I've done 2 master's degrees and a doctorate. And in all of my training, telling your own story is like a big no-no. The whole purpose of this is hopefully to help other people feel less alone in these complicated moments in our lives, where we all let go of all of that fear and bullshit and just exist together as our most authentic, flawed, gorgeous, fucked up selves. When we can be ourselves, we have the best and most perfect chance at connection. I'm Sarah Schmidt, and this is Holy Schmidt, Season 1. Hi, I'm Sarah Schmidt, and this is Holy Schmidt. Throughout the season, we're going to talk about a lot of hard things: death, divorce, illness. And in reflecting back on my own hard moments, the times when I really needed support the most, it often felt impossible to ask for help, leaving me feeling lonely and isolated and longing to be seen and supported by others. One of my greatest hopes for this podcast, and this episode in particular, is that you will find the courage to ask for help in the height of your hard times and make space for those around you who are going through theirs. One of the most unloving things we can do to ourselves is to ignore uncomfortable feelings that are begging for love and attention. And the problem with this is the more we ignore them, the louder they scream for help. Sometimes this manifests itself as reactivity, depression, resentment, and in my experience, it manifested physically as I looked cancer in the face at just 20 years old. To me, my cancer represented an opportunity, a turning point, a big wake-up call to live differently. I began the search for the silver lining, the gift in all of the shit I was going through. After all, if we can't make some meaning out of the hard things, then what is the point? I wasn't going to let it all be for nothing. Even harder than the look at death was looking at the way my parents responded to my diagnosis. They pretty much shut down. So I did the one thing I knew how to do better than anything else. I pulled up my bootstraps and I tried to solve the problem on my own. But as a 20-year-old who was most comfortable when she was focusing on others, I didn't know how to ask for help. And even if I could figure it out, I was in such a foreign place, I didn't even know what to ask for. There's a quote from Matt Kahn. People can only meet you as deeply as they've met themselves. And this sums up my experience with most people I encountered during my diagnosis and treatment. So many people were so uncomfortable with what I was experiencing that they didn't know what to do. And so they did nothing. Let's take a minute just to reflect. How comfortable are you with your own difficult emotions? When fear or frustration, anger, resentment creep in, what do? If you cannot hold space for yourself during these times, it will be very hard to truly offer meaningful support to others. And let's pause here. What the heck does holding space even mean, right? Is there a right way to do it? For me, holding space means being truly present and sitting with difficult things, knowing that emotions aren't going to kill us. It means not trying to fix or solve somebody else's problem. It means not judging or taking things personally when people share things that are hard to hear, or maybe even hurtful. It means validating your own and others' experience and feelings. It means creating a space of non-reactivity and active, engaged listening. It's easier said than done, but it's not impossible. So, here's my story. I hope it makes you feel a little less alone in your own. I had this 20-year plan, and it was going to involve I would finish my undergraduate degree, and then I would get a job, and I'd work for a couple of years, and then I would go back and get an MBA, and that's where I'd meet my husband, and we would, get married then a year later, and we would have 4 kids, and there would be every 2 years a kid, and then by the time I hit 40, I would be, whatever. I'd have 4 children, and I'd have a company I was running, and I had this big plan, and I don't really ever in that plan imagine there was a point where I went, oh, whew, I've made it, let's all relax and enjoy this, right? It was just, there was going to always be the next thing. And that was really consistent with my upbringing. I mean, it's funny. A few weeks after I had my 5th child, so I have 1 biological child, and a few weeks after Fergus was born, I remember my dad calling me. Maybe Fergus was 3 weeks old. And he said to me, he goes, well, what are you going to do next? And I remember thinking, oh my God, I'm not sleeping. I'm trying to nurse. My body is a wreck, literally wrecked. I'm I don't know my ass from my elbow. And it was so perfect, the question, because, I know I was thinking it too. But it did feel ludicrous to me, and that was a really good sign. You never sat still or rested on an accomplishment. You did it and you moved on. And it was about the doing. It wasn't about the achieving. The achievement really was just sort of oh yeah, that happened. All right, yeah, but next, now. When you were that in your head all the time, you are not really connected to what's going on in your physical body. So I was very much disassociated from it. I never really liked my physical self. I always felt like I was too tall, too fat, my feet were too big, my hair was too red, all these things, right? So the too much parts of me. So it was very easy for me to just live in my head. I could easily just vacate the other parts of me that I didn't want to spend time really thinking about or didn't feel good about. I knew I was smart, and that was what I held on to. So my junior year of college, I decided to be pre-med. That was my next iteration of what I was going to do to change the world. So I was taking chemistry, which at Northwestern then and probably now still is kind of a weed out class. There's 300 people in an auditorium, and they literally are just trying to prove to you that you don't have what it takes to go to med school. And they think they're doing you a favor. So I was overwhelmed. And that fall, I was sick a lot. I got mono. I had a lot of repeated just strep throat, and then I got an ear infection, and I just had all these little things going on. And student health services are really good with mono. I also was asked if I was pregnant 15 times every time I went, because what else? You have mono or you're pregnant? Why else would you go to the student health service in 1992, But I wasn't getting better. And then I noticed in the fall, I had these lymph nodes in my neck that were getting big, and I could feel them. So when you have mono, your lymph nodes do enlarge. And so that was typical. But these just kept getting bigger. And I kept going back, and they kept saying, well, it's probably just the mono, and, we'll just watch them. And then right before the winter break, I remember going again. I forget what else I had. Something else. I had some other infection or cold and for some reason, I don't know if there's a surgeon that was doing rounds or something at the student health service, and he came in to look at my neck. I think he knew right then and there what I had. He didn't say anything, but he said, we're going to take those out. And he said, what's your plan? I'm like, I'm leaving tomorrow. I have to pick up my brother for lunch at Marquette. He said, well, I'd like to see you before I'll get you in my OR at like 7 a.m. or something like that. So on December 16th, 1992, I went to the hospital that morning. My friend Jen drove me because I wasn't sure what to expect. And they numbed me up and he biopsied these lymph nodes. Stitched me back up, told me to wait in the waiting room. 15, 20 minutes later, came back out and said, we didn't get enough. They took me back in. They opened my neck back up. They took both nodes in their entirety and then stitched me back up again. And he said, I'll call you later. I know he knew because Hodgkin's disease spreads. It doesn't just isolate. And so I know he knew that a biopsy wasn't enough and he needed the whole node to diagnose it. I picked up my brother at Marquette. I mean, oh my God, that was such a bad day because the pain, when the numbing wore off, the swelling started. It was really uncomfortable and I was driving. And that night at 5 o'clock, he called. I mean, I answered the phone, the whole corded phone. I dragged the cord into the laundry room. I closed the laundry room door. I remember leaning on the ironing board. I mean, literally, I can see it, everything about it. I was talking to him and he said, we got the results of your biopsy back. You have Hodgkin's disease. And I was like, so that's cancer. Do you have any questions? He said, no. He's really, you don't have any questions? No, I don't have any questions. Okay. And thank you. And I hung up. And I went back into the kitchen and I said to my parents were there. I said, I have Hodgkin's disease. I forget the surgeon's name. And they just kind of looked at me blankly. And I said, I'm going to call Dave. And Dave is my cousin who's a doctor. So I went back in the laundry room and I called Dave and I said, I just got a call from the surgeon. I have Hodgkin's disease. He said, come over. And I got to their house and we sat at the kitchen table and he had all his medical textbooks out. And he told me what Hodgkin's disease was. And I remember staying at Dave and Sandy's house that night until I knew my parents would be in bed. And then I came home because I didn't want to talk to them about it. So there probably was about 13 days where nearly every single day, with the exception of probably Christmas Eve and Christmas, when I had an appointment. When they diagnose you with cancer, the next step is to figure out where it is, because the where it is with Hodgkin's disease dictates how we're going to treat it. So the big question was, is it above or below my diaphragm? If it's only above, radiation. And if it's both above and below, chemotherapy. So everything I did was geared around where is it? So every day was a different appointment. It was colonoscopy, endoscopy, bone marrow biopsy, lymphangiogram, myriads of x-rays and scans, blood work, this stuff. And every day was something different. And it all culminated in surgery, which, I have a scar from here to here, where they opened me up and they took my spleen and then sampled lymph nodes from my whole abdominal cavity. I remember being in the hospital post-surgery New Year's Eve. And then I probably came home on the 1st or 2nd of January. And we knew then that cancer was only above my diaphragm, only. I was super lucky. Yeah, but everyone told me how lucky I was. I was so fucking lucky. Yeah, you're stage 2B. This is the luckiest diagnosis you could get. I mean, if one more person had told me I was lucky, I think I might have punched them in the face. I wouldn't have punched anybody in the face, but I thought about it, I'm certain. Because this was not lucky. Even when the doctor said to me, we want to biopsy these lymph nodes, I never, ever thought I had cancer. I did not think this was coming. It was completely a surprise to me. So I would say I was numb to it, really. I don't know any 20-year-old who in their repertoire of what might be possibly wrong with me has cancer on the list, unless you're some kind of hypochondriac, right? Because what do 20-year-olds get? They get colds, they get strep, they get mono, they get pregnant. You get the flu, but you don't hear about a lot of young people who get cancer. And like I have done in most of my life, I just kicked into we'll just go through the motions here. We'll just do what we need to do. Just keep moving forward. What's next? I applied that same style of managing things to that because it's all I knew. There are a couple like big moments for me during this time. And it's been 30 years now, right? But like those kind of memories don't leave you. So one of them was a bone marrow biopsy. So they have to sample your bone marrow. In order to do that, it's really primitive process, but they basically like have to take a core of your bone out. They use like this, it looks like an apple core, but it's much smaller. And they literally like press it with all their force, all their might into your hip bones to extract the bone marrow. Of course, they numb you, but they were supposed to give me Valium or Xanax or something to kind of take the edge off. Because this is you don't really want to be aware of the pressure of it, but they forgot. And I didn't know that that was supposed to be part of the deal. So that experience for me was terrifying. I mean, I don't know. That sounds bland, but there's no other word. It was terrifying. I really felt like I definitely left my body in that moment and was like hovering above it, seeing what was happening to me. And I was thinking, oh my God. Like that was probably the first time I thought, I can't do this. There was another day where they wanted to do this like primitive, oh God, they don't do them anymore. And actually, if I had been in Chicago for all of this, they probably wouldn't have done it there, but I wasn't. So they did this thing called a Lymphangiogram, and they cut a little opening in your foot, and they are looking for a lymph vessel, and then they put dye into it. And then the dye runs through your whole lymph system, and then they can scan you and see which lymph nodes are affected. And they spent about 3 hours digging in my left foot, the top of my left foot, to try to find those lymph vessels. And they couldn't find one. And I remember at like the 2-hour mark asking, how much longer is this going to take? Because as they're in that, they're hitting nerves, and it's, like you can numb a foot, but you still feel when a nerve is struck. And we're almost done. We're almost done. We're almost there. We're almost there. And I just kept saying, I can't do this anymore. No, we're almost done. I can't do this anymore. We're almost done. I can't do this anymore. And I just remember saying like, I really lost it. And I just said, you have to stop. You have to stop. You have to stop. And I mean, my foot I couldn't move my foot, and so I really felt like just a sense of like, yeah, I can't fucking do this. Interestingly, they never found the lymph vessel. And in the process, they destroyed all the lymph in my left foot, which for the last 30 years I've lived with. It's kind of a bummer. It's a real bummer. It's like a beautiful reminder of the whole experience. And for almost a year, my left foot was blue because they put this blue dye in, so I looked like a Smurf. I mean, I laugh about it now, but literally my toes and the top of my foot was blue, like bright blue, not like like a Smurf shade of blue. That whole experience, I walked away from it. I crawled away from it. With just my whole body felt like it had just been abducted. I had scars and blue feet and, swelling, and it was just a list of things. There was not an inch of my physical self that didn't feel impacted by it. And it just lingered like that for a really long time, because it takes a long time for a body to recover from what I went through. Some of it you don't recover from. I mean, it doesn't change. Like, I don't have a spleen. I don't have lymph. I have a lot of scars. I have, there's just things that I permanently altered me physically, not to mention like the emotional stuff. My mom went with me to every single appointment that I had. But I remember feeling very much like I was the one in charge. And she was there, but this is hard. you know how you're like with a person and they're there physically with you, but you don't feel like they're really present. Her body was next to me at all of these things, but I felt insanely alone. And I really felt like it was all mine to hold and handle and carry. It's such a hard thing to say because I love her so much. And I know exactly why this was so hard for her. But if there's one thing in my life that is like a source of like deep pain, like the pain that you just like, and you'll never shake, that like lives in you in like the most like core places, that loneliness in those moments is the source of my deepest pain. And at the same time, I know she did her absolute best, but it fell profoundly short. And it left me in a really tough place. You know, I was 20 and I was just handling things that just are not, they're not things that a 20-year-old is supposed to do by themselves. When I came home from the hospital after the surgery, I recovered in our living room, family room, living room, whatever. My bed, a couple years prior, my parents had brought up here. It's behind us. So my sister could have her own room. But it meant that whenever I came home, I slept on the couch. So I came home from the hospital, having this surgery, and I was recovering and resting on the couch. But it was like Christmas time, and our family had this tradition of like, people would come to see your tree. I mean, honestly, the tree looked the same every goddamn year. So I don't quite understand this, but you bring out all the candy you made and you'd like sit around, and my dad would make like festive drinks and you would visit and everyone would visit your tree. So there I am laying on the sofa in like pajamas, and after abdominal surgery, you really can't wear like a lot of like regular clothing. So I'd be like in sweatpants or pajamas or like really uncomfortable, right? Like they cut open my whole torso. And I remember just laying there while people came to see our tree. But I don't remember anybody talking about what I was going through. There's a distinct possibility that they were, and I blocked it out. But I remember so many things so vividly that I don't think that's the case. I want to leave the door open for that because my family, they're such good people. But I think sometimes good people don't know what to do in really hard moments. And I think that was the case. They just didn't know what to say. We were not a family that talked about hard things. But it always amazes me that I laid there. And to this day, I will run into a family member who'll be like, oh my God, I didn't know you had cancer. I mean, we know everything else about each other, but they don't know that. I knew within a few days that I couldn't stay. It just wasn't the right place to be. It felt too hard for me to be there. Not for me, but for everybody else. I really felt like a burden. I felt like a project. I felt like, just felt like I couldn't stay. So I started talking to my cousin Dave about going back to Chicago. I made it sound like I thought it was best because I could get better care. That was an easy sell. Nobody argued with me. I said I didn't want to skip a semester of school. Would be too hard. All my stuff was there. I had a whole list of things. No one argued. No one debated me. No one suggested that was a bad idea. A few days later, my dad helped me pack a car and I drove myself back to campus. I remember I wasn't supposed to lift heavy things, so I remember asking somebody to help me carry stuff in, but I don't remember telling them why. I missed like 3 or 4 days of school the first week of the semester, and The next day I went to class. After class that day, I walked to the Kellogg Cancer Care Center, which was about a mile from the dorm, very convenient. And I met with the oncology team there for the first time. And I started the whole process of like how they would treat this. So the first couple days that I was back at school, I would go every morning before class to the oncology center. And there's like a period of time, it takes a few weeks, where they're like prepping you for radiation. There's all this stuff they have to do. They make molds of the organs they want to block. And they are like they had their own set of tests that weren't run, at the previous hospital that they wanted run. So I remember it being like a few weeks before I actually started radiation treatment. But every morning I would go there pretty much and then go to class. I don't remember telling anyone what was really going on for a while. My friend who had driven me to get the biopsy, she went and studied abroad for the semester. So she was like in Italy or Spain or something. It didn't really occur to me that I should tell people that this was happening. I think, one, I didn't know what words to use. And then two, I just felt like such a freak. It didn't make sense in the trajectory of what life was supposed to be like. I mean, this is like your junior year. It's really one of the best, right? You're kind of hit your stride. You declared your major. I'm an RA. I've got some friends. All of these things. And it was such an other experience. And I didn't know what to say, and I didn't know who to say it to. And I think, frankly, I didn't believe that anybody could actually support me. I didn't know what kind of support I needed. I didn't know what to ask for. If someone had said, "What do you need?" I wouldn't have known what to say. At some point, I think after starting the radiation and when I started to feel really, really sick, quickly I lost all my hair. Then or around the same time, I was just nauseated by the radiation. It was just constant, perpetual, I'm going to vomit nausea. And I did vomit a lot. I mean, I was really, really sick. I could not keep food in me. In fact, there was a new drug. It had just been FDA approved for IV use for chemotherapy patients. They didn't have it in a pill form. It's called Sofran. It's like really common now, and I think you can even buy it over the counter. They gave it to me in liquid form, and I would put it in Crystal Light lemonade and drink it. And it was the only thing that gave me just the slightest bit of relief. If you gave me a cup of Crystal Light lemonade, I'd throw it in your face, probably, because it was revolting, the taste of this, but it was the only thing that gave me relief. I think it was around that time, like maybe the first week of radiation, I really thought I was going to die. And I was either going to die from like cancer, or I was just going to die. Like I was just going to die from not being able to handle what was happening to me. I lived in a dorm that was up on the 4th floor overlooking Lake Michigan, and my bed was against the wall. And if I laid just right, I could see only the lake. I would miss the parking lot and the building that was between me and the water. And I used to lay there after class, just position myself. So all I saw was the water. And I would just like stare into it, thinking like there was just this abyss of like fear, loneliness, just terror that I think I walked around with. I had registered for 5 classes, which is one more than a normal student takes, because I was trying to like make up for some things I didn't do because I was going to be pre-med. What a joke. I dropped a class. I told this one woman who was the director of like all the RAs, because I got written up. In the middle of the night, one night, this was like, I couldn't believe I was sleeping, right? And I'm in the middle of all these treatments. Some kid on my floor knocks on my door at like 2 a.m. and asks me for a light bulb. Because RAs would have like light bulbs and supplies, and a light bulb went out in his room. And I remember opening the door and he's like, I need a light bulb. And I remember saying to him, sit in the fucking hallway till the sun comes up. And I slammed the door in his face. Because all the hallway lights are always on all night long in dorms. And I remember getting written up for that. And so she called me in. And I remember just breaking down and crying and telling her what was going on. The look on her face, I mean, it was like she saw a ghost. You know, like she did not expect that to be what I said. She was like, forget about the light bulb. But I mean, it wasn't like I had this big group of people that were like, yay, come on, Sarah, you can do it. I'll go with you to this, or I'll go with you to that. I mean, there were a few people, but I didn't know how to let people support me. I did not have a template for how to do that. I think I probably deflected a lot of support by this sense that I had to do it all myself. Because I actually think what happened was, because my family couldn't really talk to me about this and gave me the signal like it was just too much, I assumed that everyone would think the same thing and that no one would be able to get it. No one would be able to be there for me. Like, if your mom can't, then who can? I mean, and if you think about it, like, I'm a 20-year-old, my brain isn't even fully developed, you know, like all these things that I just don't, the skill sets I don't have. It dawned on me when Shayna, my oldest, was 20. That year, it really hit me. Here I had a 20-year-old woman in front of me that I was very connected to and supporting. And I got to really see what 20 looks like that year. And that year was really cathartic for me, because I could identify lots of things that I would have done differently if I was the parent in this situation. And I remember walking in for Mass one day. I was just drawn to the chapel. I mean, it was right along my walk. You know, I passed it many times a day. I'd been there just a few times, but I was drawn, and I walked in and I went to 4:00 Mass. And afterward, as I was walking out, the priest, you know, stopped me and just said hi. And I don't know if I asked if I could make an appointment or if I just talked to him right then and there. I remember sitting in his little office area, and I remember just thinking, I have to tell somebody. And he was just like, it was the most beautiful response. I have no idea what he said, but I remember in that moment feeling like somebody heard me. They weren't freaked out by it. It didn't scare him. And I had a sense that I wasn't alone. I mean, so often when people experience suffering, they look for like what in the universe can I connect to? What makes sense? You know, is it like spirit? Is it God? Is it, you know, whatever? And for me, I found like incredible consolation in parts of Catholicism that I had known my whole life, but had never made any sense to me. Just pieces of it, not all of it. I was picking and choosing, but I was finding some solace, and I was finding a sense of some meaning of this suffering that I was experiencing. I started reading like Man's Search for Meaning, and I read all of Thomas Merton's writing, and I read anybody, Elie Wiesel, anybody who wrote about suffering, I was going to read it, because I was on a hunt to find connection in hard things. And that little link in that little like office on Sheridan Road in Evanston with one person who wasn't terrified, you know, didn't seem overwhelmed by what I was going through, was a lifeline. Like, in an ideal world, my mom would have said, yeah, let's get you back to school. I'm going to come every weekend. I'll be there Fridays and Mondays, you know, and this will be hard on this family, but it's really important. We're going to be there for you. Or, you know, all the big appointments, you know, I'm going to be there for them. What are they? I remember talking to her from time to time during treatment, and we probably talked every day even, because we did talk a lot. But she wasn't there for them. She wasn't there actual appointments. And I think like that would have made a huge difference, right? Like, I would have not allowed my 20-year-old daughter to go to all of these appointments alone. When she had a heart attack, I didn't want her to go to doctor's appointments alone. I felt like she needed to have somebody there with her, right? To be like that extra set of ears and eyes and an advocate and, all those things, right? And I didn't have that. I had to be that and the patient, and that really sucks. And that pressure to be my own advocate, my own support system, took me away from being able to be the patient also, and like ask those questions like, what do I need? Because I was trying so hard to be all of those things. I remember there's an appointment in radiation where they want to they need to create a target so that they're aiming at the same place every time. What they want to do is tattoo you with some dots so that they can aim at that spot and not miss it. Okay, important, right? I knew I didn't want a tattoo. Now it's funny, I have 5 now. At the time I didn't have any, and I knew I didn't want one. And if I was going to get a tattoo, it wasn't going to be this one, because I knew I wasn't going to live my whole life with dots on my chest. So I said to them, no. They had the gun ready, the tattoo. I said, no. They were so pissed off at me. I was like, no, absolutely not. I said, you can get a Sharpie and you can mark the spot, and I will make sure it never fades. And I remember them just being so annoyed. And this radiation oncologist had a hissy fit and stormed out of the room. And I thought to myself, go fuck yourself. Who are you? And I just remember there were these little moments, they told me I couldn't wear any jewelry to radiation. I love jewelry. I always did that. And even I would wear it there every single time, and they'd ask me to take it off. And they were so annoyed by me. But I would literally show up with my earrings and a necklace, and I would have it on, and then they'd be like, you have to take off your jewelry. And I'd be like, oh, okay. I had all these little things I did to sort of, just stand up for myself, because there wasn't anybody else there to do it for me. So when I think about what would I have done? I would have been there. If it was my daughter, I would have rented an apartment in St. Louis where she was going to school. And I would have spent a lot of time there, and we would have figured it out, if it was that important to be back at school or whatever. Those things could have been done. It was within the realm of possibility. I think that me being sick was so hard for them. I don't think they could really imagine losing me, which is lovely. So they just pushed it away. And I didn't challenge them on it. I didn't say, hey, hello, I need you. Hey, I'm over here. I'm going to need X, Y, and Z. Could you do this? Could you do that? I didn't do that. Because I really thought that I was supposed to take care of it by myself. So there was this dance that was always going on in our lives that just continued in this very dramatic, venue, right? But it was I'll take care of you. I'm fine. I can handle it. I'll do it. I got it. You're okay. You worry about you. I'll take care of me. I'll take care of me and you. I am totally capable. I've spent the last 30 years trying to let people support me, to rewrite that. And I still really suck at it. There are things that get etched in us, traumas that you can find new ways to relate to them, and you can give them voice, and you can understand them intellectually. But this one lives in me. And it always will. And I just can hope for every year or every decade, I just get a little better at this. I just find a little way for it to heal. That's part of this whole process, right? What we're doing here is this is just what's one way this year, this decade, that I can help this part of my life find peace, or help somebody else. So even when I listen back to these stories and hear myself speak and tell my own truth, I at times am struck by how heavy these themes are. And I just want to put that out there that it's hard. It's hard to face your own stuff. And I also just want to say it's totally worth doing. And the only way I'm convinced we heal is by really staring the hard things in the face. So, how do we ask for help? And how do we support the ones we love who need it most? We understand pretty commonly that there are different love languages. I think that goes for helping people too. Different things speak and work for different people. So here are some ideas for how you might support those around you who are struggling with a hard time. Listen to them, but don't try to fix or solve or validate the hard thing that they are experiencing unless they explicitly ask you to try to solve their problem. Reach out to them on big days, appointment days, or anniversaries. It can be so meaningful to know that someone remembered you a year or years after something major happened in your life. Ask if you can clean their house or help with laundry or do some dishes or run a few errands. Offer to bring them a meal or help them prep it and invite them to cook with you. You could offer to child sit or walk their dog. Start off a message to them saying, you don't need to reply to this. Giving them an out, but reassuring them that you were on their mind. Every episode, I'm going to encourage you to let go of something and to welcome something good in too. Together, let's let go of the feeling like we have to carry it all on our own. Just because it's heavy doesn't mean there isn't a person who's strong enough to walk beside you. And let's welcome in the humility and the openness to ask for help and love and to give it to those in need. As humans, I believe we were created as social beings. We are meant to live in a state of interdependence with others. It is fundamental to our existence. If any of this resonated with you, we'd love for you to join our community. Subscribe to get first access to next week's episode. Follow us on Instagram. And let's continue this conversation at Holy Schmidt. WHOLEYSCHMIDT. Thank you for listening. And please tune in next time. We have so much more to share and so much more to learn together.